Hi, and welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. And on today's episode, I'm very excited to have Paul Tremblay on to discuss horror movie. Hi, Paul. Oh my God,
Hi.
yes. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure to be back. We were just talking about how long in pandemic time. It's like dog years, right? Sort of. I don't know,
Yeah,
like since we spoke. But no, thank you for having me. Thank you,
it
Forbidden Planet. Yeah.
it's kind of crazy. We had the lovely Clay McLeod Chapman in person in London a few weeks back.
hmm
And I was saying, oh, you're obviously coming on the channel and stuff, and he did a very cool impression of you.
Oh man, that's hilarious. It was funny. I was just talking to my friend John Langan. I don't know, he hasn't been published much in the UK, but
The fish,
wonderful writer, The
yes,
Fisherman. Yeah,
yeah, yes.
he does some wonderful impersonations. But I was asking him, yeah, do you know do any impersonations of other horror writers? And really, he just does Brian Evanson, but he makes him sound like Luke Wilson, or is it Owen Wilson? One or the other. Yeah.
One of the
So,
Wilson.
oh, I'll have to track down this impersonation of me by Clay.
Yes, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm sure
By
at some
track down, I
point.
mean like murder him.
Yeah, well, hopefully, yeah. This will be. I'm just trying to think of,
Yeah.
you'll find Clay.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. Yeah. Or he'll find me, I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah, yeah. It was very fun to have him in the store because obviously the crazy Clay energy in central London, they didn't know what
Yeah.
to make of it, so
Right.
it was good. It was fun. Um, so all about horror movie, which is obviously set to publish in a couple of weeks' time, which is
Mm.
very exciting. So what can you tell us about your new book?
So my book is, I guess, a riff on like the cursed film sort of trope of horror. I mean, there's been a lot of cursed film books out in the last few years, which is kind of fun, like just how that like idea becomes like popular in the zeitgeist. But anyway, so my book centers around this film that a bunch of 20 somethings shot in 1993. Very low budget indie, sort of pretentious art house horror movie, which is my favorite kind. And then something happened to prevent it from actually screening. But somehow this movie in the 30 years since has become like this weird cult phenomena, sort of like Jodorowsky's Dune, being sort of famous for never being made kind of thing. And there's one actor who played a character called the Thin Kid in the original movie. He's sort of, well, not sort of, he's narrating really the audiobook of of his experience both on set originally and now while he's going through sort of the reboot experience. So hopefully the book's a fun mix of a little bit of Hollywood send up plus like a really disturbing, grim horror setting.
And I love the way how it obviously flips backwards and forwards between like 1993 and like today, kind
Mm.
of today's Hollywood, which is a scary place to be.
It can be for sure. Yeah.
Um, was it quite fun to kind of be writing about something kind of partially based in the 90s? Like, was there a nostalgic element for it for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some of it was a little bit of a necessity, like, because I mean, the original idea for this book started from like me watching some like, me doing some deep dives into Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, so like the movie in my book is really nothing like Texas Chainsaw, but the idea of like this really, independent, almost like dangerous thing was made. When I say dangerous, like they definitely put themselves in danger on set. So I was like, well, like thankfully you can't really do that anymore. I mean, there were safety rules and union rules. So part of like setting it in 1993 was a little bit of that kind of necessity, but also, setting it in a time that I'm, that I lived through and I'm quite familiar with sort of like the Gen X perspective on, what art is. So it was kind of fun to have that dichotomy between like what's happening now with what was happening in 93 and like, and the differences in what they thought about what they were doing. Or really, I guess when it's now, it's really just a thin kid thinking about it.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And there's I think with the both with the book and almost I suppose kind of the nature of making art house films is the I suppose there's kind of slow burn nature that everything took a while and everything's kind of just slowly like progressing to this like crazy point. So it is one of those books you like, you read a couple of chapters and then I had to sit and think about what I just read, which is
Oh,
which
oh, good.
is it's
Yeah.
very it's definitely a compliment because you're just like, hang on a minute. What's going on?
Yeah.
Um, so how much of this as well, I know obviously you've had some experience with kind of cynical Hollywood and kind of
Uh-huh.
making films and stuff. How much of this was kind of based on your experience?
Oh yeah. So I mean, when the Thin Kid is, talking to producers and filmmakers and the like, I mean, that's certainly, refractions of conversations that I have, but also, experiences that, my other writer friends have had. Um, you know, in the United States, novelists don't have a union. We really don't have like a big sort of body to help protect us, other than just ourselves and maybe a lawyer and maybe, our agents when we're dealing with Hollywood. So I didn't mind telling some of these stories out of school because I mean that's really the only the only way we have to sort of protect ourselves.
Mhm.
And not that like all experiences with Hollywood are negative, but when you're for me, like my own experience, one of the shocking things was like the numbers of money involved in terms of like, hey, this movie had a $25 million budget. And then when you go to set for a couple of days, like it's a little bit like mind blowing. Uh, and I can't really describe it any other way. It's like, oh, this is 25 million. There's a lot, there's a lot at stake here. You can maybe see why like a lot of decisions are sort of made for money reasons as opposed to story reasons.
Mhm.
Which maybe isn't 100% fair, but it also is fair, I think, from my point of view. Yeah, geez, did I answer the question? Sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think I suppose with the experience of obviously of the cabin
Hmm.
recent, film and stuff that yeah, I suppose was the kind of the experience what you imagined it to be, or was it kind of different to
Well, I
how?
mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think I mean, I think we all imagine it, but like, I think there was no chance whatever I was going to imagine was going to line up with what it was, And even now, like the movie's been out for over a year. It's like I've every once in a while, like, oh yeah, that thing happened. Like this thing that sort of took over my life for a while. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was amazing, life changing
Mm.
in some ways, but also some of like the most stressful times of my life too. So it was like this, I don't know. This I want to say mixed bag, but I guess that's probably the best way to describe it.
Mm.
I mean, it's you know, the stress was certainly a problem. Some of that's just like a me problem, but some of it wasn't a me problem. So I don't know. Like there was a sort of a give and take.
Yeah. I suppose as well when you're talking about kind of the big budget Hollywood films, and then you kind of look at, I don't know, something like say Terrifier that was like made obviously on like a shoestring
Yeah,
budget and is probably, if you close your eyes, you can see him. So, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, frightening. Um, so how did you manage to kind of keep track in your book of both kind of the past and the present and almost kind of the, I don't know, the blurred lines in between?
Mm.
Like, was that difficult to keep track of?
Um, I mean, I guess yes and no. I mean, probably mostly yes, but it wasn't like I had. I mean, I kept a lot of notes. It wasn't like I had like the cork board with
Yeah.
lines and stuff, which might have been cool. But like I didn't outline the book before I started it, but I did sort of like would peek ahead and try to figure out which would go where. And I wrote it in sort of pretty much in the order that you
Yeah.
have in the book. I moved maybe one little section up compared to where it was in the final draft,
Mhm.
but that was it. And it really wasn't a major thing. I just moved like the first director part up a little bit earlier in the book. But otherwise, I kind of wrote it in that way and just sort of like going by feel, and let like where something end help lead like what I thought would be the next part. Um, and that includes like I didn't write the whole screenplay first because the book does include the whole screenplay of the movie they shot in '93. I wrote those pieces sort of hopefully to help match with what came before it, what came after it. So I mean that was kind of like a fun way to go through it. And honestly, for me, it led to like some discoveries that hadn't necessarily anticipated, which is unusual for me. I mean, there are always in novels like discoveries like that for me, but I often outline first. So like there usually isn't like giant plot changes, but in this book there were a couple of times, which was kind of fun.
So it kind of took on a life of its own, in a
Yeah,
different
I mean, there's definitely like a point in the book, or you were just sort of describing it earlier, like it's almost like building like this Rube Goldberg machine. Like you have to put all these things in places, and then once you like sort of flick the first marble, then everything starts clicking and clacking and going crazy. That's probably like the last 100 pages of the book, I would say.
Oh my, yes, yeah, definitely. Without too many spoilers for people out there, but
Yeah,
yeah, there was I think kind of it's so interesting to have the seeing this all from the Thing Kid's perspective and just trying to kind of make sense of what he wants from this
right.
stuff, which was yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a question that hangs over the whole thing. But at the same time, you do get like really Cleo's, but this is not a huge spoiler, but Cleo wrote the screenplay.
Yes.
So you definitely feel like, and it's sort of an unusually written screenplay, which she admits early on in the book, this isn't, this wouldn't be a screenplay that you would turn into a studio. They would not like it, for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I mean, that was hopefully a fun other way to build some of the other characters, or at least have a different sort of perspective from the other characters.
Definitely. And where did the idea of the mask come from? Because obviously we're very familiar with having masks in, various kind of horror films in particular. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that was it. Like just the idea that, so many of the famous, sometimes we say famous monsters, people will start rattling off, oh, like Michael Myers and Jason and Leatherface. And I don't necessarily consider them monsters per se. To me, those are like, slasher killers. But I mean, they are really monsters. So I kind of wanted to combine the idea of what I imagine as like a monster with maybe like a slasher type monster too, and sort of combine them into one sort of character. Um, yeah, no, I mean, masks are interesting. I've never really done a story or, never mind a novel, but certainly not even a short story involving some like a mask like that. So
mm.
it was kind of fun to throw everything I could think of masky into the book.
Are you waiting to be presented with a mask at upcoming signing? I'm sure
Oh,
someone's gonna like
that would be cool and weird. Yeah.
it would be cool and weird.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, to be honest, like, I'm not even 100% sure what the mask looks like. Yeah, I mean, I certainly describe it at points in the book,
Yeah.
but it's not something that's like fixed in my head. And in my discussion with both Titan Books and my US publisher, I was like, I don't want a mask on the cover because I don't want that image. Because as soon as that's on the cover, that image is now fixed in the reader's
Yes.
head. I want the reader to come up with, based on like what's happening in the book, I want the reader to, sort of imagine their own mask.
Mm.
Um, I thought that was sort of unique, special or important to this story. Like there are plenty other things that I've written where, oh no, like, I'm very fortunate to have like limited edition things,
Mm.
and the artist will do stuff, and I love that part of it. And I wish all my books could have illustrations, but in this case, that'd be one illustration that I would not want to have is the mask.
Fair.
But after the fact, yeah, like if a fan were to
Yeah.
draw something, I mean, I think that's super cool, or a reader. But to have that like plastered on the book itself, I thought it was important not to do that.
Mhm. I can definitely see like a comic like version of this, like with
That would be
the
really
yeah,
cool.
that'd be
Yeah.
very cool. Would there be any particular artists you would like to work with?
Oh, no, I'm so bad at remembering particular artists. Like and maybe this is just reflection of more like, I think about the writers like Jeff Lemire and some other comic writers that I really enjoy. Not to like devalue the artist's work at all, but yeah, I'm just bad at remembering names in general.
So we have I suppose with a lot of your books, which I really enjoy, is obviously the other character of either Massachusetts or Boston or yeah. Is
Mhm.
there a reason why this is a continuing theme? Your hometown.
Yeah, I mean, part of it, I don't want to say part of it's laziness, but it's sort of an area that I know. But in the I'm fortunate that, well, I should say fictionally fortunate, that I live in an area that has like a pretty rich tradition in American, certainly Gothic fiction. So it's fun to like, use those expectations, put them to work for me.
Mhm.
A lot of times it's sort of undercutting sort of what people expect from a New England horror story or something like that. Um, yeah, and I mean, and some of it is since I've lived here my whole life, it's hard not to just to be continually like my memory palace is sort of the house I grew up in. in this area that I grew up in. You
Mhm.
know, I came to the realization with this book in particular, it's like, man, I've used my house that I grew up in so many different books and stories. Like, yeah, usually mixed with something else, but like
Mhm.
it's the house in A Head Full of Ghosts, mixed with my sister's house. It's the house in Paul Bear's Club. Uh, at part, well, part of the house that Carson lives in, at least some of the rooms, but not like the
Mhm.
full house. I don't know. I just can't help but just keep going back there.
We're gonna
Um,
have to start doing like Hollywood tours around. Like this is
yeah, yeah. Be a very short tour. Like,
yeah.
here it is. Yeah.
So was there a particular character you who kind of stood out for you in whichever respect when you were writing them? Was there someone who particularly kind of came to life and why?
Um, I mean, I think, the Thin Kid's somewhat obvious choice. It's its first, from his point of view. Um, and I feel like I got to, if I got to imbue him a little bit with sort of the cynical, especially when he's talking about what's happening now side that I don't let out too much and usually just keep to myself, which is probably a smart thing to do. Um, Otherwise, Chloe to me was the most fascinating character. I feel like I spent almost as much time in her head as I did in the Thin Kid's head, particularly, writing the screenplay. To me, that was all her. And that's not like a spoiler or anything. I mean, that's all her thoughts. So like, yeah, those two, it's kind of funny, like the the novel before that, not the short story collection, was the Pallbearers Club. And you know, I always like to imagine like there are little jumping off points between novels, like as a weird pseudo connection. The Thin Kid and Art Barbara physically are very similar, but personality wise quite different. Um, and I certainly wouldn't call Chloe Mercy Brown, whoever is, for anyone who's read the Paul Bearers Club, but I do have, just sort of realizing it now, these sort of dueling, not, they're not like saying, hey, this did or didn't happen, but still like two different perspectives that the book really sort of focuses on.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and does this all kind of feed into, so it's big, it's obviously becoming a bigger and bigger thing now, the Tremblay-Verse. There's kind of little
Yeah.
Easter eggs everywhere, and you kind of spot different people, and people mentioning, the kind of documentary from Head Full of Ghosts, and like,
Mm.
it's so interesting to kind of see those Easter eggs. So is that something you're conscious that you're doing, or it's just happening?
Um, it's definitely more just happening like in the moment, sort of like, oh, and for, some of it's just like, oh, that's just kind of fun. Like, yeah, it's funny as a reader, like I tend not to read like trilogies and sequels. Like I like standalone books. However, I do think it's cool when I'm reading, Stephen King or Peter Straub has done this. Even like, some more like mainstream literary folks like Roberto Bolaño, like they'll have these standalone things, but reference another character from another book. And uh, I don't know, to me, as a reader, it's like, oh, that's cool. Like, I don't need a full sequel, but
Mm,
getting like this little flash of a connection, makes that whole world seem a little bit more real to me.
mm.
Because there are sort of these weird overlaps. I mean, that's how sort of life works. We always, the joke is it's a small world, like the weird connections that crop up. So I don't know. Fictionally, I think that part of it feels a little bit natural. It's like, oh yeah, like if these all things existed in the same time, there would be like these sort of weird little glancing connections.
Yeah, especially if they were all in Massachusetts.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Massachusetts geographically is a very small place.
So, so far you've done like vampires, viruses, possession, like you've covered a gamut of kind of horror themes in your
Mm.
books. Is there a particular kind of theme or area that you want to cover, or is there something you're kind of working on now that's completely different?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I worry I'm running out of stuff. Um, like I've said previously I've said that I'd love to do like a giant monster
Mm.
novel, but I feel like I've done so many giant monster short stories, and I did a giant monster novella for The Beast You Are. I feel like if you add all those together, that's kind of covered now. Um, Yeah, I don't know. I think a werewolf would be really hard to do, partly because there have been so many recent like great werewolf novels, like Stephen Graham Jones's Mongrels. Like, okay, that exists. I don't need no one needs a Tremblay werewolf novel. Um, I don't know. Like I wish I could think that far ahead. Like so,
Mhm.
I just started a book that's going to mix some science fiction and some humor along with horror. Um, the science fiction would be like a literal like 5 minutes into the future. And actually, part of me worries that like when I finish it, it'll be like 5 minutes in the past. We'll see, or by the time it comes out. Um, yeah, so I don't know. And also, like I wrote a middle grade book that's coming out in the
Okay.
U.S. That's coming out in the U.S. summer of 2025. So, hopefully
Very
there's
cool.
interest from UK publishers as well. Uh, yeah, that was sort of fun. Like I wasn't planning. I just happened to have the idea about this, sixth grader, and wrote the story. So we'll see.
Interesting. I think middle grade horror in particular, it's starting to get a bit more coverage in the UK, but
Hmm.
there wasn't a huge amount up until kind of maybe the last 3, 4 years. It's kind of becoming a thing, but
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah. No, it is good. Also, it's funny. Like, uh, you hear like I don't know if this was your case when you were growing up, but I think sort of a lot of horror fans like they love to tell stories about how they were reading Stephen King or Clive Barker or something at a really young age, at what would be considered middle grade.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, like when I was writing the book, I was like, well, I still want it to feel scary and dangerous, but without the adult
Yeah.
sort of themes necessarily. So there was sort of that line in between. I do think it's creepy as hell. We'll see. The kids' book,
Ooh.
yeah.
That does sound very cool. That does sound very, very cool.
Yeah.
I was actually we just had obviously Comic Con over here and I was moderating Derek Landy, who does the School Degree Pleasant books.
Mm.
And obviously they kind of started off, I suppose, as kind of middle grade YA crossover, but you have
Yeah.
necromancy and various other kind of fun things going on in that universe. But he was saying how he's working on adult horror, so he's going the other way now.
Mm.
But he was just like, oh, that you're kind of not fenced in as such with like middle grade, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's I suppose more rules that you have to.
Yeah. No. And although I've read some middle grade that was published recently, and part of the reason why I even dared to try writing it was like I read one called The Nest by Kenneth Oppel, which is beautifully written and really scary. I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do this with middle grade because I assumed it would have read much younger to me, but it didn't.
Yeah.
So for my story, I feel like I didn't really have to make any, I felt like I didn't have to make any compromises other
Mhm.
than this is what the story needed, right? This is what
Yeah.
this, if there were any compromises was, there's no ambiguity, even though I think middle schoolers could probably handle ambiguity more than adults can. Um, and the kid's going to overcome sort of the horrors as opposed to like an adult novel I would write, you'd probably be subsumed, but happily that, it's the story that I wrote, it works. It would have been a worse story if there was like a really bummer of an ending, I think.
Yeah.
It just didn't
Yeah.
fit the story. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see.
Oh my God, that sounds incredible. We have to find you a UK publisher.
They're working on it. Yeah, yeah,
That sounds incredible. I gave Derek a copy of a horror movie because obviously we had some
yeah.
proof at Comic Con and he was just like, oh, I just ordered a signed copy from you guys. And I was just like,
Oh,
well,
that's so nice.
you
Thank you, Derek.
can still buy that. And then
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
also read this now. So
Also, I think in most of I think all of I would mention you were asking before, like to sorry to go back my brain to the question about like how did I keep track of all the switchbacks
yeah.
and or the time changes. Uh Titans Publishing, like I took scans of like 5, 6 pages of my writing notebook, just a mess. So if people
Mhm.
really wanted to see how I was keeping track, I don't know. If you look at that, you'd be like, wait a minute, how is he keeping track? This is a total mess. But that version of the book will include scans of those pages.
I am so intrigued to see the finished version because yeah, I think anyone who has like crazy notes, because I do the same, that only
Yeah.
I can decipher them like later on.
Oh, for
So,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, but there's some nuggets in there somewhere. Um, so the old adage of the book is always better than the movie. How true is that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like a fun sort of party conversation. If
Yeah.
if things are dull, you could always ask, hey, what, So I think it's a very short list. And if anyone says knock at the cabin, there's going to be fighting words. Um, I mean, because especially I think if you read the book prior to seeing the movie, it's almost
Mm.
always I mean, so I don't know, like I would say with some confidence that the movie Jaws is better than the book it's based
Yes.
on.
Mhm.
Um, I've never read The Godfather, but like most people say, yeah, that book is nowhere near, doesn't have nowhere near the depth of those movies. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like it's really, I think, difficult to come up with examples. I mean, I think there are a lot of examples where these things are like really good adaptations of each other, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's the funny part. Like, so many more people see the movie than read the book, but almost everyone agrees. Oh yeah, the book was better than the movie. I don't know, at least in the reading circles, I guess. Maybe if it's just film circles, they say the other thing. But
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. I was just trying to think when I was like coming up with these questions, I was just like, oh, there is a couple of films that obviously stand out as kind of good adaptations or things like Lord of the Rings and stuff that were obviously,
mhm.
big budget, beautifully shot kind of things, but obviously now they're coming back to the well again. Do wonder.
Yeah, yeah, too many. Like turning the Hobbit to how many movies was that?
Yeah, it was three, which was too
That was
many.
absurd. Yeah, for like such a small book. But do you have any examples of movies you thought were better than the source material?
Um, I was going to say like with I would agree with Jaws, and actually funnily enough there is a kind of prequel book that's come out this year called Quint, that's the story of Quint
There
as
is?
a younger man, like
Ah,
what brought him to where he is, and it has the kind of okay of the Jaws estate, so
do you know
it's
who
like
wrote it? I'm very jealous.
I'll send you the,
Yeah,
oh, let me look it up now because
yeah.
it was like a really, really kind of fun. It's quite a short book as well.
I'm surprised Joe Hill
Um,
didn't do that. I know he's
yeah,
obsessed
it
with
sounds
Jaws
like
as well. Yeah.
it was by Robert Launtner, and yeah, it came out earlier this year. So I
Huh.
think Harper published it in the UK, but
Okay.
yeah, there's definitely some. But I think quite often when I go see the film, it will like prompt me to, if I haven't read the book, to go and read the book. Or you get the adaptation thing. I was just thinking, I'm a huge like Resident Evil fan. I hate the films.
Yeah.
They're awful, but the games are amazing. So
Yeah.
there
So
is
I mean that's a new
yeah,
conversation is movie
yes,
or video game because there have been so many more video game and actually a lot of them have been so really good. Like, The Last of Us. I didn't really
yes.
play, but my son played. I did enjoy that show. And it seems like Fallout which I haven't seen or played, but people really seem to be enjoying Fallout.
Yeah, Fallout was amazing. It's definitely worth the watch. I didn't know there was so I've been recently playing the remake of Dead Space, and there's an anime of Dead Space, which
Ah.
I didn't even realize was a thing. So there you go. We all need like more time off of our day job.
Yeah, for sure.
So we are going to segue now into the film universe. So
Uh,
for everyone out there, we are going to be doing top five slash top six of, or even seven, who knows,
yeah,
of your favorite horror films and kind of why they impacted you and whether they've kind of influenced like
yeah.
your books. So I don't know what order to do this in. Do you have a particular favorite that we should save till last? Or
Um, yeah, that's a good question. You want to start at like the bottom of the list and
yeah,
move
like
up or
yeah, let's and then people can like try and guess what your number
okay.
one's gonna be.
So all right, so
So number six.
we'll call them the honorable mentions, 7 and 6. How's that?
Yes. Yeah, okay,
Uh
yeah.
and so those would be the 1999 movie called Ravenous, starring Guy Pearce.
Mhm.
Such a quirky movie, and I think when it came out, I think it was one of those like ahead of its time movies in terms of its politics. And if you watch it now, it's like, oh, this was made now for what it's sort of saying. Uh, but just I love movies that have like weird tones,
Mhm.
and like sometimes there are hard shifts. And it's really hard to pull off, and I think this movie does it extremely well. And with bonus points for an amazing eclectic soundtrack that's really difficult to find now. Really, the only place I've been able to find is YouTube. I have a CD of it, but
Oh,
it's not on streaming, like the full soundtrack. And it was a minimalist composer plus Daniel Nybar, the dude from
Okay.
Gorillas.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
butchering
Yeah.
his name, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, the other honorable mention would be Session 9, and
Okay.
partly because it was filmed in the town next to the town I grew up in, at the Danvers State Mental Hospital.
Okay.
And when I was a child, sort of the cruel joke about like, oh, where are you going to go to college? "Oh, I'm going to Danvers State. Um, and it was decommissioned in the 80s. There was a giant decommissioning of many mental health facilities
Right.
during the Reagan years.
Mm.
And that coincided with like um, a huge homeless population sort of explosion because like a lot of these places just opened the doors and let
Yeah.
these people out with nowhere to go. But anyway, so Danvers State is this really gothic looking, and even like from above, like the some of the wings look like bat wings coming off of the main thing. So Session 9 is really sort of like this low budget, intense film that was filmed in Danvers State. So some of my appeal to it is like, oh, this place that was like the boogeyman for me. This movie takes place there, and it's such a strange, disquieting movie that I think gets better with each rewatch. I remember watching the first time, I was like, oh, it's pretty good. But with each rewatch, I'm like, oh no, this is great. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I haven't. No, when was the last time you rewatched it as well? Because I have been rewatching and rereading kind of some of the
Yeah,
classic horrors that I saw as a kid and just
yeah.
kind of seeing if they still impact me the same way now. So
I would
yeah.
say 3 years ago ish. I watched it with one of my children who are older now. Um, yeah, and that movie was made in the mid 2000s, the first decade, somewhere in there. I definitely recommend it. David Caruso is in it wonderfully. David Caruso, uh, but some other great character actors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. I've got a couple of recommendations. Let's go. We're in top five now. I feel like there should be
Yes.
like radio chart music or something. What's
I'm counting. Maybe. Oh, did I just give eight? One. I got my list. One, two, three. All right, fine. We're there. One more. I mean, one more. Honorable mention then would be American Werewolf in London.
oh
Uh,
yeah.
just and that probably is really top five given the number of times I've watched it. Uh, it's one of the few horror comedies that's both scary and funny. And the
Yes.
source of the humor is, well, sometimes it's the horror. It's when Griffin Dunn shows up. I mean, his visage is funny and horrific, but like the werewolf scenes, like the scene in the tube underground is still so just terrifying.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to go
Okay.
from like I remember watching like Teen Wolf, like as a kid with Michael J.
Yeah.
Fox, and then like watching that a couple of years later. Yeah, very different.
Yeah,
Very
for
different
sure.
world. So what have we got next?
Okay. So now we'll start with number five, I guess.
Yes.
uh, the top four are going to be movies everyone's heard of. So this fifth one, maybe people have heard of. Hopefully they have. I feel like in the 15 years since it's been made, it's really started to gain like by word of mouth. But anyway, it's a Australian film called Lake Mungo.
Oh,
Uh,
I got that on my to watch list.
yeah, it's presented as sort of like a faux documentary. And I think sometimes it's positioned as, oh, it's a found footage when it's more like there are some found footages, but mainly it's like
Hmm.
this is presented as a documentary, people being interviewed. Really documenting the aftermath of what had happened to a family after their, teenage daughter drowned in a pond. And it's just so amazingly, it's about grief, it's just so sad and just so smartly done and so realistic. And you talked about we talked about things like as a Rube Goldberg machine building up, like this movie builds up to, for me, like one of the biggest scares in a film that I've ever had as an adult.
Mhm.
Uh, so I have been unhealthily obsessed with that movie. My novel Disappearance at Devil's Rock definitely is informed and or is fan fiction of Lake Mungo in some aspects. My publicist gets so mad when I say that, but uh, yeah. So love that movie. Holds up to many many rewatches.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely got to bump that up. So yeah, I think it's either on Prime or Netflix at the
Yeah,
moment.
it's funny. It
So,
seems to like just rotate through the streamers.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where it's now currently, but
Yeah.
yeah, it should be out there somewhere.
Yeah. Because sometimes you'll be like, oh, I have to pay for it here. But then it's just like, oh no, it's free.
Yeah.
Okay, that works. Um, so number four.
So number four, so I mean, a lot of these are just like the personal meaning ones to me. So number four would be Godzilla 1954.
Right.
Um, so I mean, Godzilla really started, I probably saw that when I was like 7 or 8. I mean, to me, that started my lifelong love, terrified of horror,
Mhm.
uh, sort of life. Um, yeah, so I just saw that movie countless times as a kid, partly because we had a program pre-cable television called Creature Double Feature, and on Saturdays they would show two movies. The first movie was usually a Godzilla movie,
Mhm.
and really some of the goofy ones from the 70s, but occasionally, they would show the 1954 version too. And the second movie would be like a B movie or a Hammer film, and those scared the hell out of me. But Godzilla, I was just mesmerized by, so as a child, like, and then rewatching as an adult, obviously there's you know the very sort of on point metaphor of what Japan went through, in World War II, with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and just there's just such a weight to that movie, and just even rewatching it now, um, you know, it'd be goofy to say it still holds up because it does. It's a very powerful experience, especially the original. Not in the United
Yes.
States, they remade it with not Aaron Burr, Raymond Burr. Like Aaron Burr is some historical figure. Raymond Burr, like him narrating for American audiences, but um, rewatch the original.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Because it's the obviously Titan published the Godzilla, like Art of Godzilla and stuff, and it's the anniversary
yeah.
this year. So we're hopefully doing some stuff for next Comic Con with a giant Godzilla. We had turtles this time.
Oh, amazing.
We had yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles this time, and next time we got Godzilla. So yeah.
Yeah, as part of my midlife crisis, which I think, midlife crisis is comparatively, this is pretty harmless.
Yeah.
I've been getting some tattoos. My newest one is actually the 1954 head of
Oh
Godzilla.
wow. Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah,
That's a very cool tie.
thanks. I blame my daughter. She started me down the road because she's an amateur tattooist now. She's
Oh,
19.
very
Yeah. Yeah,
cool.
she gave me one in her room
Yeah,
uh in December, which is a
yeah.
strange experience. Tattoo parlor in my house. Yeah.
Because you're like, I know we've spoken about this before, like into a bit like the grungy scene and stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, sort of punk indie, yeah, etc.
yeah, yeah. So I presume like the tattoo thing is just part of the
Yeah, but I started pretty late. The first one was the summer of 22. I had promised my daughter Emma that I would take her for her first.
yeah.
And so when I went with her, she was like, "Oh, you have to get one too." I'm like, "Do I?" So, but I did. I got actually the floating dresser that appears in the Pallbearers Club,
Very
and I
cool.
got that because Emma drew that for me for the book.
Mm.
So it had meaning for me. Of course, as soon as I got it, she's like, "That looks terrible. Why'd you get it?" It's like, "Thanks,"
Oh
but
no.
I like it. Yeah.
It's quite hard to cover up as well.
Oh no, it's fine. I enjoy it. Yeah. And actually, I've seen a few people post on Instagram. There are a few other people with floating dresser tattoos out there, which is pretty cool.
That's very cool. What will be your next tattoo, do you think?
I don't know. I might be one more just because I have three on my left arm.
Okay.
I have the floating dresser. My daughter did the symbol of Husker Du. She did that
Ah,
thing.
cool.
And I got the Black Rabbit of Inlay from Watership Down up
Okay.
here. So now I have Godzilla. I have a tattoo for my son. It's a design of like a wishing well because I used to sing that song to him when he was a
Okay.
kid. Not the Terrence Trent D'Arby wishing well. I don't have that. I don't have that vocal range.
Yeah.
Uh, a song by Bob Mould, who used to be in Husker Du. So I think I need one more just to have symmetry. And since I am a math teacher after all, it's like, I think I need
Yeah.
three and three, but I don't know what it would be yet. So, but time's running out. I only have like a few more years before my skin starts getting wrinkly and crepey. So the
Oh
clock
yeah,
is
and then
ticking.
tattoos get weird. And nothing says horror like Watership Down. That has scarred
Yeah. Oh,
many
right.
many children. Oh dear. So what's next on the list?
Okay, so that was Godzilla. Excuse me. So then we're gonna go with Night of the Living Dead, the
Yes.
original.
Love that.
Yeah, just I mean, another movie that like feels like it could have been made now.
Yes.
Yeah, particularly with sort of how it ends. And it's just still so effective and so frightening, and so well done. Um, yeah, I was never like a huge zombie guy because like, hey, they made like the perfect zombie movie with this. Uh, you just
Yeah.
can't. It's hard to beat it. When I rewatched the movie with my daughter, uh, geez, a few years ago, it was both like, oh, she's really smart, but also heartbreaking for her. It's like before we even got to the end, when she
Mm.
saw like people were coming, she's like, oh, they're gonna shoot, essentially they're gonna shoot the black guy, aren't they? And
Yeah.
it was like, oh, she could see that coming. Of course she could see that coming
Mm.
because not only has it been a trope in movies, but just politically speaking, there's just the power of that movie.
Yeah.
The ending still is just so, breathtakingly awful.
Oh God. Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah,
it like you said, it still stands up today as what, just a phenomenal
yeah,
zombie film. So yeah, other than the only thing I think recently that has been kind of in it, well, at least as kind of shocking in a way, is probably like Train to Busan or something like that. That was really
yeah.
just
That's really good. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that was intense. So what's next? What do we have?
Oh, it's so hard because we're down to like 2 and 1. I think, you
Yeah.
could probably flip them, but we'll put Jaws second, not number one.
Okay.
Um, but Jaws is definitely the movie that's given me the most nightmares. I mean, when I saw it when I was 10 years old, watching Quint, spoiler, I get, bit in half, broke my brain. I had, not exaggerating, 6, 7 years of shark nightmares. Like most of my dreams, I would somehow end up in the water and Jaws would attack. But I've watched the movie probably at least 50 times, although I still cover my eyes at the Quint scene.
Yes.
Um,
Mm.
I've seen so much more. I've seen obviously much gorier movies, but like I think there's just a part of me that fears if I see it again, that'll send my brain back to what it was when it was a 10-year-old, then I'll have shark nightmares again. So, um, but I periodically go into Jaws rabbit holes. You mentioned that earlier. Like the last time I went into it, I really dug into Robert Shaw. Like I found one of the plays that he had written, The Man in the Glass Booth, and read that, and just like, yeah, just read all like Jaws adjacent things.
Do you find that you have a whole day of like if someone asks you, "Oh, what did you do today?" and it's just like, well, I went I went down this rabbit hole for like
Yeah,
12 hours and now I've read
yeah,
this really obscure
yeah,
piece of literature or something.
pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah. So number one. So this is a tough one because obviously there's so many classic
Yeah,
films. There's also obviously been some great kind of new horror films or newer horror films. What is your number one?
yeah. So my number one is The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing.
I hope you were going to
Um,
say that
yeah,
because
yeah.
yes.
Now, and again, like, the practical effects are amazing, but just side that, I don't know, it's such an intense story. Um, and just, I don't know, so smart, and like how it's sort of a different kind of Rube Goldberg machine that just like ratchets up the pressure. There remains in my mind like two scenes that you still jump out of your seat, or actually you still like, I know it's coming, but like if someone has never watched the movie before, I usually tell them, oh, there are two guaranteed scenes that you're gonna jump, and it's not like a cheap jump scare either. It works. It's there for. Um, my son, who's not really a horror fan, like he's like, oh, it's just a great movie. He like, um, and I guess obviously, I love sort of the ambiguity of the ending. Like we don't know if either, McCready or Childs are a thing at the end of the movie. It's something I sort of riffed on a little bit in A Head Full of Ghosts, with the ending of A Head Full of Ghosts. The idea that you're seeing someone's breath and maybe not seeing someone else's breath, whether that was purposeful by the filmmaker. It's hard to think it's not purposeful in some ways, but yeah.
Yeah, that the thing even now, because that was when I rewatched earlier this year, and I was just like, yeah, no, it's still absolutely terrifying. And even again, it's kind of one of those, it's I suppose on a fairly small budget and stuff, but it's just yeah, the humanity of it all, and oh, that poor dog. Oh.
Yeah. I know that was a barrier for my daughter to watch. She didn't, because she doesn't want to see anything bad happen to dogs. Like the first time we tried watching it, she's like, nope. And then, she was interested in trying again. So I had to sort of tell her, okay, this is what happens, with the dogs at the beginning. After that, it's sort of okay. But I have zero interest in watching like any prequels, sequels.
Mm.
to the thing. I mean, because it'll all pale in comparison. Like, I mean, that's the hard part. If you were talking about having like a universe or connections. You don't mind if there's like a little connection, but
Yeah.
for me, that's the hard part about viewing anything that's a series is because especially if the first book just I so connected with it, there's no chance for the books after that to have that same impact. I mean, there are obvious exceptions,
Mm.
of course. I think one of them being Stephen Graham Jones's recent trilogy of slasher novels. Um, but yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
the
I
thing,
because
long live the thing.
I think the thing had a remake or something not that long ago.
Yeah, it was like what
Like,
2011. I think it was a prequel.
yeah.
Uh, didn't bother watching it.
No,
No.
it didn't need to happen. I suppose again it's the Hollywood thing of let's come back to this world and let's do a thing in it and actually
It's too often it's like they come back to the world and do the same things over again. Like maybe it should be come back to it, but like be only have like the subtle or a slight connection and do something different.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, or even because I know obviously they're working on a new Alien film at the moment. It's just like, oh,
Yeah, another alien film.
I wasn't a huge fan of the the more like Covenant and stuff. It just
Yeah, same.
yeah, I don't know. Is there any of the kind of newer wave of films that you particularly loved, like anything you've seen recently?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm gonna forget like half of them, but like for one of the US editions of horror movie for
Mm.
the Barnes and Noble bookstore
Right.
edition, I wrote like an essay of what I thought were underappreciated films, and the majority of them were things that have come out within like the last 10 years. Um, so some recent favorites would include it. Not it wasn't on this list because I don't think it's underappreciated, but Saint Maud,
Right.
Rose Glass
Yes.
Saint Maud is an
Mhm.
absolute favorite. I sometimes write to the I sometimes write to the soundtrack. Um, oh man, I'm gonna forget some other ones. Argentinian director Damien Rugnar. I hope I'm not butchering his name. I fear I might be. But his two films, Terrified or Aterados, not Terrifier, Terrified.
No.
I I had a friend I recommended Terrified to, and he
Yes.
mistakenly watched Terrifier instead. And he was like, Paul recommended this movie for me? Really? So I always make no, like if you see a clown, it's not Terrified. That's a different movie. And his new one this year called When Evil Lurks. Just like both movies are just pure nightmare film, and they sort of operate in a strange sort of like nightmare logic.
Mm.
But just like in terms of like pure dread and scariness, I think those two are sort of unmatched. Um, whereas like Saint Maud is something like I wish I wrote kind of thing, like just the whole vibe of that. I just so admire that film. Um, yeah, I guess I'll throw out one more. I'm gonna butcher it because it's a long title. It's like an Eric LaRocca title.
Yeah. Oh my God,
um,
that
like
man
your
can.
heart can't beat unless I tell it to. I think I have the
Oh,
title right.
okay.
Um, it's a, like a small indie riff, and it's not a spoiler on a vampire, and it's just very claustrophobic and sad and weird, which is sort of like my favorite kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there's just so much wonderful stuff. I was just gonna like throw in like Late Night with the Devil and stuff, which was
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to watch that yet.
oh my God, do
Yeah,
watch it. But yeah, and
I,
talk
I
to me.
watched Ghost Watch for the first time within the last year. Yeah,
Okay.
after so many British friends telling me, oh, like
Yeah.
first, like when you wrote Head for the Ghost, did you watch Ghost Watch? It's like, no, I hadn't. But yeah, no, that was amazing. Pipes. What a great name for a what a great name for a ghost.
Yeah, it's too good. We had I don't think it ever made it over to the US, but there was a Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, which
Yes, I watched that actually when the sort of pandemic hit. Uh, I spent some mental health time watching that on YouTube.
it's so good. We when because we had Philip Facassi over last year, and I was
Yeah,
trying to explain what Garth Marenghi's. Then I was just like, you can't really explain. Just watch it.
no, it's very funny. No, that's I mean, well, I would say a full rabbit hole, but like into reading some of the, I forget the actor's name who's in that, but he's a Ayoade,
Yeah, Matt Holness.
the whole this, but
Director,
one of
yeah.
the other actors.
Richard Ayoade or Matt Berry?
Yes, yes, yes. No, Ayoade. Yeah. So I've listened to some of his comedy books.
Yes,
Yeah. So I definitely did branch out from Dark Place. Uh,
yes. Yeah, there's some yeah, there's some weird weird UK shows that
yeah,
were made in the 90s, but yeah, they've stood the test of time. So
yeah.
but yeah, obviously thank you, Paul, for joining us today and
Well, thank
chatting
you.
about your favorite horror films. And obviously we have signed copies of Horror Movie
Woohoo.
that woohoo, that we I've got a few left, but we've got a load of people have pre-ordered them. So
Great.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for pre-ordering. That's great.
Thank you for signing them all. And yeah, hopefully you can come over to the UK again at some point and we'll do some stuff in person. So
Yeah. No, I dream of coming back to the UK. I really got to go in 2018 and then very briefly in 2019. I was supposed to go April of 2020, but obviously stuff
yes.
happened. So yeah, no, I do have to make it back for sure.
Yeah. The world yeah, the world imploded and it's still question mark.
Yeah, still floating. Yeah.
It's still imploding, but
Yeah.
in smaller
Right.
intervals. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And if people want to check out the website, they can still pre-order a signed copy now. And I insist they must because it's an excellent book.
Thank
So
you.
thank you very much.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.